Not that you guys like me, I'll go ahead and say it. I'm Palestinian American. Shoot, damn! You booked me! Now listen, a lot of people don't know much about Palestinians because there hasn't been too many famous ones in history, and I guess the ones who are that people don't really know who they are. Just Yasser Arafat and Jesus. Check the location, and
I was thinking about, having family initially from Bethlehem and people in America not knowing that is in occupied Palestine. So like people, I think it was from like Americans like saying like, why do we give a shit about this and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, your savior is from there. Comedians, we have this thing where it's like, we can talk about politics. And if somebody like disagrees with us, we're like, hey, what do I know? I'm a comedian, Right. I'm just being funny, but at the same time, we can, a comedian can talk about politics and get people to laugh about an issue that they may disagree with because it's comedy. Humor is an example of a shared communication. And there's certainly analogous ways of achieving that where no laughter is involved. But, why not have some laughs as well?
Yeah.
This black dude with like dreadlocks came up to me after and he's like, yo, man, he's like, when you were on stage and like people I started watching how people were responding to your bit, I was like, man, we got some fucking Zionists up in this motherfucker. It was the most interesting setting that I'd done that bit in.
You can't laugh at that.
Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where I don't know why I did that. It was a choice, and I chose not to.
It's heavily edited, don't worry.
Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That. This is the podcast where we take topics that aren't funny, and we prove that they are funny.
After all,
absolutely. That was Steve Mers. Steve Mers is the co-host. If this is your first time listening, that's who that is.
I'm at the turret gun. You're flying the whole plane.
I'm piloting this bad boy, and we're picking up our precious cargo, which is Sammy Obeid, broadcasting live from California. What's up, man?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Live from the cargo section.
That's right. You got your parachute strapped in, ready to go, just in case things go south?
I got my cargo pants, yeah. What are cargo pants but a parachute on the pants, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man, that's a good idea for pants. Why weren't they actually parachutes?
There's a reserve pantaloons in there.
Yeah, just in case there's a tear, you've got a backup pair of pants. Oh, that'd be awesome.
I got a parachute in my pants. Is that sexual harassment? No, I actually got a parachute.
Yeah. Is that a parachute in your pants? Or are you happy to see me?
Just the elementary school kind.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sammy is here to talk about something that isn't parachutes. We're going to talk about his recent clip that went viral. Sammy is a comedian. He's been on Conan. He has been on Throwdown with Bobby Flay. He's been profiled in Time Magazine, New York Times. Putting in the work, man. When did you start doing comedy?
2007, though I actually tried it when I was in college a couple years before and bombed. And, you wonder, like, do you count those years between that bomb and the comeback? Like, was I thinking about it that much? But I don't think it's fair.
No, it's not. And I appreciate you making that distinction between the two. Because some people, especially like open mic.
I had a lot of time. I had 4 years to reflect on that bomb. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't say that I started the first time I got on stage. I did some character stuff when I first started that was awful. That doesn't count.
Dude, me too. I did a character as well. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, what was yours?
It was just supposed to be like this really creepy guy. It was like creepy guy hanging out at a hardware store. And I wore all black and gloves. Yeah, it didn't go well.
Okay.
Sounds great on paper, though.
Yeah.
It does. I thought so, too.
I think... Just looking for something to make his parachute pants with. That's it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a tough place to start. I feel like a lot of people start from that level, like trying to do a character bit because for me it was I wasn't comfortable being myself on stage. So let me personify somebody else and that came across as trying to be funny. That never works.
Hiding behind a veneer.
Right. Nobody likes the guy who tries to be funny.
Right.
In conversation or on stage. And that is something that it is evident that you do not do. Fantastic bit. We're going to play that bit in 1 second once Jeremy adjusts the camera angles here. Do you want to introduce the clip as far as like what inspired or set up the scene? So you were hired to do a private event. Take us through that.
Yeah, well, it's actually a public event, but it was sponsored by a certain organization, and they had seen me at another gig. Actually, my roommate put on this show, and I did a spot on his show, and they saw me there, and they asked me if I wanted to do this big gig. They're like, oh, Sarah Silverman's on it. I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And I knew a little bit about the organization, but not a lot, and some people saw that I was on the flyer, and they pointed out some things that they thought I should know about the organization, specifically that it has a very specific stance on Palestinians and the Palestinian issue, which is surprising because it's a human rights, civil rights organization. So it's like, like great track record of civil rights, except in that particular department, which I thought interesting, but also kind of made sense. So after like reading up on it, I was like, shit, I probably should acknowledge this while I'm on stage. Just to like be real, just like have a real moment and see what happens. Unfortunately, I do have the bits that could go with it. So I was like, I'm going to like announce that I'm Palestinian in the middle of the set. And if it goes well, I'll do like the ultimate bit, which was the bit that's in this clip. And I got to the place where I was comfortable enough to do it. And then I did it. And and it was recorded by someone in the audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I noticed that's how you closed your set. So I assume that you really set them up. That's not something that you wanted to that you would have opened with.
Yeah, it was a 10-minute set, I think. So I think for the first 5 minutes, I was just massaging. I was just doing all fun, clean humor.
Awesome. So a human rights organization for the right humans. They should have.
Yeah, there we go.
They should have specified.
Yeah.
But only for the right ones.
I'm 3/4 Arab, but with a beard I look 4/3 Arab. You know what I mean? Yeah. Why are you not laughing? That's funny, man. Now that you guys like me, I'll go ahead and say it. I'm Palestinian American. Shoot, damn! You booked me! Now listen, a lot of people don't know much about Palestinians because there hasn't been too many famous ones in history, and I guess the ones who are that people don't really know who they are. Just Yasser Arafat and Jesus. Check the location. And DJ Khaled. DJ Khaled also. Those are representatives, Jesus and DJ Khaled. In fact, when they came out with the New Testament, they were like, another one. That's what happened, dude. Straight up. A couple people like that. That's cool. I'm a very proud Palestinian, but I'm your friend. You know what I mean? I put the pal in Palestinian. What? Yeah. I'm your pal. Some of you are getting weirded out. That's fine. My great-grandma was born in Bethlehem. I tell people this like, oh, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania? I'm like, yeah, that's the one, for sure, dude. She was Amish. No, it's the Bethlehem. Everybody knows that Jesus is from Bethlehem, right? But most people can't point it out on a map. It's a very complicated geopolitical question and answer. Fair enough. My niece asked me last Christmas. She's 5 years old. She said, where's Bethlehem? I gave her the simplest answer you could, a 5-year-old. I said, well, technically it's in Palestine. But America, we don't recognize Palestine as a country, so technically it's in the Palestinian territories, specifically the West Bank, not the Gaza Strip. It was part of Israel, but they handed over the Palestinian National Authority in 1995 under the interim agreement of Sub-Point 5, Section 2, UN resolution. Of course, before that, part of British Mandate Palestine, of course, before that, part of the Ottoman Empire. You could argue that it still is in Israel technically, of course, because Israel technically occupies the West Bank, but Israel, of course, would say that is not the truth, because that is against international law under many counts. Don't tell me when, JK, they already know. It's really very complicated, but Jesus is from there. Merry Christmas. So that was the simplest answer I gave her. 45 seconds, I tried my best, and then she's like, well, is Santa Claus real? I'm like, 100% Santa Claus is real. Are you kidding me? That guy's so real. She's like, what are you getting me for Christmas? I gave you the gift of Palestine. What more do you want? Like, people pay to see my shows. I gave it to you free of charge. She's like, free Palestine? I was like, exactly. You You know how hard it is to do that joke in front of this crowd? I just did it because I'm your pal. I'm your pal. I love you. I respect you for booking me. Let's work together to bring peace and the end of hatred all across the world. All across the world. I'm Sammy Obeid. Thank you so much. Love you guys.
That's actually how I end all my sets, with that public service announcement.
It's a great way to bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just a centering of, of our consciousness. How many times have you been forced to watch that video?
Just maybe like 5 now.
You will watch your comedy and you will enjoy it.
Yeah.
All right, so take us through the conception of that bit. How did it start? What was the inspiration from it? Like, what was the moment you were like, oh, this is funny? And you can take us back to the first time you even wrote a joke about the whole conflict.
Yeah, well, I started writing about being Palestinian and Palestinian stuff, I think in 2010. I was a few years into comedy, and that's where I was finally like comfortable enough to talk about it. The first joke that I wrote was, I went to a Palestinian restaurant for the first time, which was it was a lie because I've been to many Palestinian restaurants, but I was like, went to a Palestinian restaurant and it was very authentic. In fact, you had to throw a rock to get the server's attention. And then finally the food's brought to you by an activist on a flotilla. And then, and sometimes it's intercepted by the guy at the kosher deli. Like, that's authentic. I used to tell that joke. And then that was like, I told that like for a year. That was like the first one I told. And then my jokes got better and better after a while. And then in 2018, I had... I submit a bit to Now This Politics, and they put it on their network, and it got like 1 million views. At the time, there was a lot of stuff going on, like the Palestinians were marching for the right to return. It was like the 70-year anniversary of the initial war in 1948, so it was like a big time, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So they posted the clip, got 1 million views, and just a lot of people like commenting, talking shit, and like normal stuff that you get whenever you post a stand-up video. And that kind of just like really inspired me to like talk more about I get the best. I feel like I get the best comedy or ideas for comedy sparked by like arguments that I get into, or like trite things that people say. And I forget which one exactly inspired this, but I was thinking about, having family initially from Bethlehem and people in America not knowing that is in occupied Palestine. So like people, I think it was from like Americans like saying like, why do we give a shit about this and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, your savior is from there, So like, I think that was kind of the initial premise. And then I was like, well, Bethlehem is in Palestine, but like, maybe there's like more history to it. So I just like wanted to make sure like, oh yeah, so it was handed over in 1995. And I looked that up and I was like, kind of thinking how to frame the joke. And then, framed it in the way that's like my niece asking me, how do you explain it to a child in the simplest way possible? Because it's not simple. So basically the crux of the joke is like, the situation's so complex that even if you were to explain it to a child, that's like the simplest way you could explain it. And of course I had to work on a pun just because that's what I do. And like, I had been sitting on that idea for a while, the Free Palestine pun of like free. I think I had done it in another way before, but it wasn't that way. And I was like, if I can get that into this one, then this joke works. So basically the joke had been written by the end of 2018 and I had done it on many stages, and it was a big joke for crowds who were on board with it. Like worked for middle road crowds, but really like if I did that in like San Francisco or somewhere liberal or like an Arab crowd, it's gonna just crush. So then by this was in 2019 when this video was shot. So by mid 2019, I had it down so well that I was like, I think I'm so comfortable with the beats of this joke, I can sell it in this crowd. So yeah, I did.
Yeah, having the confidence to do a bit like that in front of a crowd like that too, like that's That's where it has to start. If you don't have that confidence and you didn't get a laugh, like that would be detrimental to the whole thing.
I was also banking on the fact, well, like I said, like, it took some time to win him over, but I was also banking on the fact that a lot of people there were plus ones. People just come and hang out, or it's like see Sarah Silverman and stuff. And it was majority that organization, majority kind of, that vibe of, people who work for the organization and do have that sentiment regarding the Palestinians. But a lot of people, I could tell, like there was, after the show, like this black dude with like dreadlocks came up to me after, and he's like, yo, man, he's like, when you were on stage and like people I started watching how people were responding to your bit, I was like, man, we got some fucking Zionists up in this motherfucker. I was like, all right. I was like, so there were people on the other end of the spectrum in that show that I was able to ride off of their energy. But it was tough. Like I could feel like that bit. The other thing about that bit is, I was like, should I even release this? Because I have tapes of that bit where like every little beat of the joke does well and gets like the laugh where it's supposed to get the laugh. But like that was like super dry all the way to like the end. So, but it was the most interesting setting that I'd done that bit in. So that's why I posted it.
Do you think that that's why it went as viral as it did? Just the context?
I think so. Absolutely. I think so, and because I was debating it as I was like, shouldn't I just post like the best version? I was like, that could go well, but there was something magical about that night that I felt as I was getting off stage, because like I said, I was riding off the energy of the plus ones, but everybody was clapping it, everybody was on board at the end. It was kind of like, we obviously don't share your viewpoint on this, but we respect where you're coming from and we appreciate that you did that. Like that was the vibe.
Right. That's where you start with, you're not going to change somebody's mind who's had this belief for their whole lives with a joke.
Right.
But to at least open the door a crack and allow them
to
see into the room.
And that's the essence of progress in a conversation, So there was something very magical about it. And I definitely felt it that night, because like right after stage, I got high and just had a great night. So
you mean you weren't high on life?
I wasn't high. No, I only like to get high when I'm happy. That's my thing. I don't like to get high if I'm like in a bad mood. So,
dude, 100%.
if I'm getting high, things are going well.
100%.
Yeah.
It's man. Then all the doubts creep in, and all of a sudden it was the worst that I've ever had.
Yeah.
I should quit. I think too the fact that the stakes were so high that elevates it from a performer and from an audience member. There's more of a risk taken. People don't appreciate it as much. Let's say if you just did like the DJ Khaled joke, like that. I mean, on its own, it's a great Twitter joke, but in the middle of that chunk, it's like it's perfectly timed. And again, the whole the pun thing, just being able to work that in. Is that a pun? I don't know. That's not a pun.
There seemed to be just the right amount of tension too, where it wasn't like, oh, and it like kills the vibe. It was like enough for it to be like the comedic, release the tension kind of a tension. And yeah, I liked, and I could tell like when you said that usually it does better. That I could tell like, yeah, they were holding back for a little bit. They can't resist it at a certain point because it was a very well written bit, so it's good. It's like it definitely cut through that. It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, a rule in comedy. Like, if you can establish a rhythm of laughter early on, you're going to be able to coast off of that, no matter what you're saying. It's kind of like, even if you were like to tell a horrible racist joke that nobody should laugh at, people will start laughing. People will still be laughing at the beginning until they realize how horrible it is because you set up that rhythm,
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I really like just played the crowd for the first 5 minutes and then went into that.
Yeah.
But also it was the Comedy Store, it was like the Comedy Store main room, which is like the stakes are high because you don't want to bomb there. Like it's a good room. You want to get asked back,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Continue to raise the stakes, and that makes the payoff 10 times better than it, if you're doing that for an audience that is going to laugh at it.
Totally.
Yeah, and I like what you said about, too, setting them up and like kind of priming them for like they're going to find it funny,
I call
at
it
least
credit.
In the beginning. What's that?
I call it. Oh, you mean in the bit or in his set, like leading up to the bit?
Leading up to the bit.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, it's kind of, I always call it like that social credit where you kind of like build up this thing, and then people are gonna like way more willing to laugh at the weirder stuff or whatever it is,
Right. I always say it's like Super Mario Brothers, like you get a mushroom and then you're like bigger Mario.
Yeah.
And then you're spitting the fireballs and then you're invincible. And then you tell one bad joke and you're back down to small Mario.
Yeah. That's nice.
But you've still got the chance to win them back. You still got the chance to get that second mushroom.
You do. Yeah. But there's always, you make a couple wrong turns, you can die.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
100%. And that kind of plays into our natural like pattern detection, how our brains work. That's why comedy works. Is it breaks the pattern and it introduces the beginning of a new pattern. So especially doing this at the end, you've established them like they have this pattern of who you are as a comic, and you would have to work a little bit extra hard to break this new pattern that they've developed and this trust that they've built.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, like applying directly to this situation, the goal was like, hey, you like me, so you like this person who you like disagree with seriously on this issue. So that's just a sign that we can get along and have this conversation.
Absolutely. And the way you started too, 3/4 Arab with a beard, 4/3 Arab. Like that's a very effective way to gently introduce.
It was the transition. I had been taught. I opened with a joke about my name, which is very neutral. Then I did math jokes for like 2 to 3 minutes. But like good math jokes. I know that sounds like, oh, well, that's how you're going to lose them quick. But it was like my math jokes are like my forte. So I did math jokes for the first 3 minutes, and then I transitioned into the Arab stuff. Yeah.
Right. As long as you care about something, you can win an audience over.
For sure.
Yeah.
If you're just like, I'm going to make these math puns for 5 minutes, it's like, all right, we get it.
It's what is it specifically? Not right. Is it about math or not? Like, it's show me a good example of that. And Right. I've been a fan of yours for a couple of years because I have a similar start. I think I write jokes the way I like to see comedy in others, and I think you do a lot of like wordplay, like clever stuff, but also like issues, like you kind of like social issues and things like that. You touch on that, so it's like it's a combination.
Yeah. I try to balance like the serious stuff with silly stuff, but yeah, I always like to like kind of just keep an open mind and just keep evolving and like not try to stick to one kind of comedy because like puns come so easily to me. So it's like if I search for puns, I'm going to have a set of all puns. So I kind of like to try to just search for other stuff and let the puns just kind of come naturally.
Yeah. I've actually gotten really sick of doing wordplay over the years. Like I'm very sick of it at this point. Where it's like gotta try something new. People like it, but I don't like it. And if I don't like it, that's enough to be obvious to other people. And I don't like to pretend I like something when I don't. So yeah, I get it. Like gotta change.
Yeah, it comes across as very inauthentic, Steve.
It can, that's for sure.
Now, right after you do deliver that first line, you say, why are you not laughing? That's funny, man. In a lot of cases, this can turn an audience a little bit, or like get them to think about, well, was it really funny? In this case, I think it really works. When does that tool work, and why? At least for you, in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, that was more of like a playful. It's like the majority of the crowd's laughing, so I'm just going to pick on the one section that's not laughing. That's kind of a critical mass thing. Like if most people are laughing and there's somebody who's not laughing, you can use their energy to get that person to laugh. If nobody's laughing, the line doesn't really work.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not going to change their minds. Like, oh no, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that.
They need to see that other people find it funny, and then they can't deny that. It's sort of like one of those things where they have that mob mentality.
Right.
Absolutely.
Pressure. Yeah.
For sure. Then now that you like me, I'm Palestinian American. You kind of feel the tension build. It creates the tension, which at this point, like it feels to me like you've got them. I don't know if that's right, but just body language wise, the tonality of your voice, it really sounded like you were very confident right there that like, okay, this. I think this is going to go well. Was that the case?
Yeah, definitely. And that was really the purpose of those first few minutes of doing like my A jokes, to the point where it's like, all right, now I can Now I can literally talk about anything, and I'm giving you more jokes, just like on a topic that is not what you're expecting.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like that tension is fun to play with right there too.
Yeah,
where they're like, oh, he just introduced this new information. Is he going to attack us? Is he going to get preachy? Is like, what's going to happen next? And then, so you create that tension, and then when you release it, it's even a bigger exhale, which I think kind of adds to the laughter. So, even if your jokes weren't funny, it still would have released the tension. But because they were funny, it was like a bigger release. That's always so fun to do. I was just in Alabama, and I have a joke about Confederate statues that works great up here. And and it was that same thing. Like in the back of my mind, I was like, "Am I going to tell this joke?" I didn't write it into my set. And then I got the light, and it's about a 90-second bit, and my mouth just started saying it. Like and I was like, "Well, here we go. This could go one of two ways," and it went really well. And just kind of introducing that, like, what do you guys think of Confederate statues? Or, I'm Palestinian American. It creates that kind of like, where's he going to go with this?
Yep.
Are we going to be good? Like, so far we've been good. Is he going to take us to the promised land? That wasn't intended. That was a pun. Okay. Established that. So then you introduce there are not a lot of famous Palestinians, which is a great premise to go by. At first, when you say Yasser Arafat, everybody thinks of him. Like that's when you said it the first time I watched it, that's the first picture that came to mind.
Totally.
Was that intentional? Did you play around with the different famous Palestinians?
that I would say in that set, that's the oldest joke.
Okay.
I think I wrote that one in 2011, pre-DJ Khaled. Mm-hmm. The joke was just Yasser Arafat and Jesus. It was a one-liner. And a couple years later, when DJ Khaled emerges, then I tagged the joke. But yeah. So that's an old joke, just based on that truth. Like who are the famous Palestinians? So yeah.
Don't you love when you write just an innocuous one-liner and then years later you can work it into a bigger bit?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love recycling.
Yeah. It's just like you just felt me.
That's how I build bits. I don't write bits about one thing. It's like I always have one-liners and then they all have to go into one topic because, one-liners are like just scattered junk drawers of material. It can be very hard to keep track of. It's just natural to put it all in a chunk,
Totally. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm a pal. I'm your friend. I put the pal in Palestinian. The wordplay, again, of course, makes you approachable. Everybody loves a little, put the pal in Palestine. Like,
yeah, a little friendly pun.
Yeah, for sure. And then your great grandma was born in Bethlehem. Now, this to me, this is maybe me digging too deep into the joke because I tend to do that quite a bit. But kind of playing up the naivety of other people to the Palestinian plight. So the fact that somebody would ask, this hypothetical person would ask, "Oh, Bethlehem, PA," kind of plays into that. Was that the intent?
Can I interject the naivety of nativity?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take three wise men to figure this one out.
The nativete.
Yeah. That's what I call it. Sounds like a glamorous...
Oh, it's a restaurant somewhere. You know it is.
The nativete.
The nativete.
It's a tea shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nativity. I mean, somebody's got to do that. Nativity.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Come on. It's right there.
Made with frankincense or something. I don't know.
Right. So was that the intent of the joke to kind of play up that naivety?
Yeah, I mean that's the way in. I think that's the most. I think that's the interesting thing about it is that from an American perspective, 65% of Americans are Christian. Believe in Jesus, and most of those people know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. That's a very standard fact about Jesus, So at which point you have maybe 60, 55 on a bad day % of Americans know that Jesus is from Bethlehem. Now, what percentage of those people know where Bethlehem is on a map? we're talking like 5%, you know. But if you ask most of those people who quote unquote know where Bethlehem is, you ask them like, well, it's in Israel. That's technically not correct unless you are speaking of, yes, it's in Israel because Israel occupies the West Bank. And that was kind of the motivation for uncluttering why people may think it's in Israel, or why people don't even know where it is. I mean, if it was in a definitive country that America recognized, maybe we would know where Bethlehem is, you know?
Yeah. It seems like the standard is definitely in this country without knowing any deeper history. People are just, it's Israel. It's Israel.
In Israel.
There's no
the place
Palestine.
in the Noel song. Yeah.
Israel's always been
it's in those
the kingdom of Israel.
David was their George Washington, right? Something like that.
And the thing is, the other thing is that the joke was finished by then, but I left out a few tags. So the tags were, so people say it's Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm like, oh yeah, she was Amish. The Holy Land, just a few hours from Scranton. She knew the three wise men from Dunder Mifflin. You know the deal.
Yeah.
So that was a tag. And then also when I explain the geopolitics, I had later that year, I started adding more to it to go back even further. So before that, the Ottoman Empire. And then I say before that, a conquest during the Crusades. Before that, another conquest during the Crusades. Before that, another conquest during the Crusades. Before that, the Canaanites. Before that, the dinosaurs, presumably. So I added those lines. And I think there was one more tag that I had, but I forgot, maybe near the end. But yeah,
right.
that was the leaner version of the joke.
Got it. And I do love that explain this to a 5-year-old. That you can take any complex topic and turn it into a joke just using that formula. And the way you did it was that's where I was like, oh, this bit is I couldn't tell if that was a setup, a punchline, or a setup filled with punchlines. But either way, I was like if you're a comic and you forget that you're watching a bit, because as a comic, when you watch another comic go up in the back of your head, you're doing the math. You're connected. You're making these connections along with them. You're tagging them. Where in this case, as I'm watching, I'm not doing any of that. I just became a fan of comedy again, and then you close it out with the Free Palestine line. Kind of take us through how did you put that together in such a way where it was so punchy but also just facts?
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, I'd already had a bunch of jokes about my niece, or she asks a question and I explain it to her. So we all understand that kind of joke format works because it makes things so innocent and cute, and it also the essence of simplicity. You have to simplify things when you talk to a child, and the serious, the gravity of this situation balanced with the innocence and cuteness makes for a comedic release. So I realized quickly that was the best way to execute what could be an official history lesson for people who actually want to know, but put in the simplest way. It's kind of like saying listen, if my 5-year-old niece can get this, you can too. So here's what it is. And then the rest was just making sure I was historically accurate and using the right language. Again, the updated version of the joke goes back further than the Ottoman Empire because obviously things happened before the Ottoman Empire. But the language in the joke is that in a way that's accurate and is not disputable. So I have, I had people who were commenting on the Twitter of I'm a Zionist and I think this is funny. And, people who completely disagree politically with the notion of Free Palestine at least agreed with the joke.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The just throwing the Merry Christmas and is Santa Claus real? What was the idea behind that?
Merry Christmas is a good punchline. It's you can always I put my dick in a box. Merry Christmas. It always it works for any premise. So so Merry Christmas just kind of made sense. It was like, okay, obviously the structure of this joke is rant, right? This is and ultimately becoming a rant where you go da 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 da, and then nice silly release at the end, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you hear that, comics? If you can't come up with a punchline to your joke, just Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
There it is.
Just
a universal thing.
And let me just be clear: Happy Holidays doesn't work as well.
No, because Christmas has that k, right? That's the reason. That's the only reason.
Exactly.
Unless you add motherfucker in there. Happy
Happy
holidays,
holidays,
motherfucker.
motherfucker. They're like, why is he being so mean to his niece?
Oh man! All right. So, and then you do close it out by kind of you cap it off with a little commentary, like, you know how hard it is to tell a joke to this joke to this group of people.
Yeah.
That
was totally on the fly, and that was nothing more than just a comic's rage of like, that deserved more, you know. Like I wasn't trying to like make a statement like, hey, I did this for you guys. It was more just like, normally that gets a bigger applause.
Yeah. Without saying normally that gets a bigger applause.
Yeah.
And then calling it back to, I'm your pal. That's,
right.
Even those people who aren't on board are like, oh yeah, no, we were friends from earlier.
Right.
So cool. You remember when we were friends from earlier? All right. And
I mean, also, to add in the spirit, the theme of that night was like uniting against hate. Like we're fighting hate. So it was kind of like to be anything less than supportive of me and that at that moment would be, against the purpose of the whole night. So I was kind of also using that.
And that kind of takes us into the topic itself, you can't laugh at that. Of course, people have vested interest on either side, which, to me, that whole, it's got to be an us versus them thing. And to me, picking that apart is what's fun, regardless of the conflict. To you have more of a knowledge. You have a vested interest. Obviously, you have family from there. When was there a time where you were just like, oh, this is funny? Maybe before you did the restaurant joke, when you were comfortable enough on stage. Because, I mean, we can find things funny without knowing how to communicate why it's funny. Was there an initial moment where you were like, God, this sucks, but man, that.
That's a good question, because I don't distinctly have a memory of that, but certainly, I've always had a comics mind. So like I see the joke everywhere. I would say, because really I knew that I was Palestinian as a kid, but I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't know the context. I didn't really fully understand what was going on until 9/11 happened. And 9/11 happened, and it was like literally, I think it was that night, the whole nation is trying to search for answers of like, who did this? And then they show this clip of like Palestinians cheering and like holding up guns. And I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. Like this, like it was clearly, I don't know the context of like the video clip, but it was like clearly they were like choosing a certain group of Palestinians who were like obviously very anti-American and happy about the situation. And like seeing that and like, okay, this is going to be good. Next time somebody asks me what race I am,
just show them the video.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, because at the time I was the only Palestinian that I knew of in my like city. There's probably other ones in the city, but like I didn't know of any at my school, et cetera, et cetera. So like I didn't really have much of an identity. And then that happened, and then like I was just like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So like starting from there, and that was really when, like, because what followed that was the Iraq War a few years later, or not a few years later, like a few months later, or not a few months later, no, about a year and a half later, and that was when my parents started getting really into politics and would like take me to like marches and vigils, and then we started doing a lot of like Palestinian stuff, and like the family got more invested, but it was really serious stuff. These were really sad, sad meetings and sad, events. So it wasn't like I was just thinking of jokes left and right, but being a comic, it's like, yeah, you can't help but think things are funny. I also took a Palestinian literature class a couple years later when I was in college. And there was certainly some things I read in the books that were, like that I would think of like jokes too, but I was like, nobody would get these jokes. There's like no audience for this, but it was just kind of like seeing it as an American, because, growing up, my identity is American. I never really like identified as Palestinian. So learning about Palestinian culture as an American there was some humor there, in how complex and like little people know about the situation over there. But it wasn't like, my mind wasn't like comedically developed enough to express it.
That's a funny point, too. Just kind of the limited worldview we have. So 9/11 happens. Yeah. They show this. Of course, American media finds this small pocket of people that's going to evoke an emotion in everyone else, looking for that simplified bad guy. That character to walk into the room, and the music changes, and this is the bad guy, and it's like, I know that either this is going to be an awful story. Like if we put this in terms of like a narrative of like a movie or a TV show, because it's so written in black and white when the world is so gray, and people are way more complex than that, or this is I'm not interested either way, really. So lately the opinion has shifted a little bit, because back then it was always, we're pro-Israel, they're the ones that support us and blah blah blah. But it's shifted to be more empathetic to the Palestinian plight. Why do you think that is? And in the humanizing of it, humanizing of it. I'm adding too many syllables.
Humanitizing.
The humanitize, yes.
The humanitizers of it, for sure. Humanitizer. It's interesting because it's like growing up and being in that small pocket of activism. And my parents were much more involved than I was. I would just kind of go occasionally, but like they were super invested. And just realizing what a small fringe it was. I went to UC Berkeley. I knew that I was in the mentality there is a fringe mentality in the United States. And like all these events, I knew that this was like a small, group of people. But of course, around the world, in many countries, that's not the case. There's like countries who would stand by Palestinians. There's countries that recognize Palestine as a country. So in America, it's just a small minority. Mm-hmm. And then as I got more comfortable in comedy, I was doing comedy in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and kind of like you did have this gradual, it's maybe not the best word, but like wokeness, if you want to like use you can like remove the negative connotations of wokeness, because a lot of people have them, but like it really is ultimately people becoming more conscious of stuff, so that was gradually happening. I mean, you have the election of Obama. That's kind of like a turning point for America. And, progressivism is a little bit more embraced, but I'm still in this pocket, this Bay Area pocket where people are very liberal. And so I'm now able to do the jokes because like they work in San Francisco, because that most people embrace them there. And then I start kind of getting more in touch with the Arab community and start getting booked there. So I'm like realizing that there's kind of this bigger network of people who's becoming more active in the issue. Still a minority. And then the big turn that I noticed was in 2014 when the crisis, many crises, but this particular one in 2014 in Gaza, where you have hundreds, maybe even thousands. I forget what the number was, but like a lot of civilians being killed. And for once, there was footage of it, and you have footage of children who've been murdered. And like the world had not seen this for whatever reason. Either the media had not been able to get to there, or it wasn't circulated in the media until then for whatever reason. There's a lot of theories as to why, but that was the turning point. And suddenly people were like, holy shit, maybe the Palestinians are oppressed people. Like that became a more mainstream, not even close to being mainstream, but more of a mainstream. And then over the years, as wokeness increases, you have more and more people becoming aware. Then with the 2018 situation, more people becoming aware as well. And then this one really felt like, we don't know measurements, because what we do know is that like 64% of Democrats would consider a reduction in arms aid to Israel. Whatever that means, if you consider America purely Republican Democrat, which it's not, it's still a minority. But what you had here in this situation is because of social media, because young people on social media, and the part of wokeness in young people is wanting to identify with the underdog, the side who's being oppressed. And in that case, it's the Palestinians. And now with like TikTok and people kind of wanting to be on the side of the underdog, you had this spread of people siding with Palestinians. But meanwhile, you also have this critical mass of people who are really aware of the issue and, starting to understand that this is wrong. And also people in the world, you had all this solidarity around the world, and people see that, and it's a kind of a multiplied effect that finally people are kind of waking up to what's going on, because what happened this time was no different than anything that's been happening in the last, 40, 50 years. So it's really just a perception thing, and the advent of social media. And sorry, I'm not supposed to be making this funny, am I?
No,
but
no. We're exploring. Yeah, I mean, we explore. We talk about comedy, but it's not necessarily a comedy.
Cool. Cool. I sometimes like do podcasts, and I'm like 5 minutes into like just talking, and I'm like, oh shit, this is a comedy. But yeah, I think it's just all those like critical things made this feel like, but it's still not it's not the government's majority, and it's still not the people's majority. I mean, like 90% of people did not even give a shit about this. But if you're on Twitter, it's going to seem like everybody gives a shit. If you're on TikTok, it's going to seem like everybody gives a shit. But 90% of Americans do not give a shit still. But I am hopeful. I think it is increasing. But I'll hear a lot of like Israelis or people who are, very pro-Israel saying, oh, we're losing the PR battle because kids on TikTok are all taking the you're not losing anything. Israel's still going to get $4 billion in aid this year. It's just younger people are becoming woke to the issue. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And to even think of it as a winner or loser game, like nobody wins.
Yeah.
If
Totally.
you kill somebody today, that's a bad day at work.
Yeah.
Regardless of your job, nobody's
right.
Unless you're a sociopath.
Or a comedian. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I love about comedy, though, is like in your case, like it gets people to see certain situations through different eyes. How do you think those same principles of stand-up comedy, of having to connect with your audience, of having to look at things from a different point of view, how do you think that can translate in an actual like geopolitical setting, in like two people coming to a negotiating table? Like what skills from stand-up could get translated to that?
All of them. I mean, humor has this transcending power to be able to cross all boundaries. Like, I mean, there's so many ways. Like, for instance, humor or doing well in comedy requires likability, right? For people to want to hear your point of view, to be on board with the beats of your narrative, you have to present yourself as likable and be liked by these people. And that's, achieved comedically through a lot of tools, as we know, being vulnerable, being personable, saying things that we know that the audience will understand and be on board with. And obviously, as you get better in comedy, you're doing it in a way that's authentic to yourself versus like pandering or, lying. As we did when we were characters in the beginning.
Yes, good callback.
but yeah, I mean, so likability is essential for like negotiating, for having a conversation. People are going to want to like you if they're going to want to like listen to what you're going to have to say and have empathy for you.
They actually, yeah. I was gonna say they said that on a an interrogation thing I saw on YouTube recently. They're like, you got to get people to like you if you want to get in there. Like when they were interviewing Cruz, what was his first name? I forget, but he shot up that school and they were interviewing him, and he was pretending to be crazy and all these things and mentally ill, and he's just it's interesting how and definitely applies to comedy for sure.
Lowers those defenses a little bit.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, comedy is you are structuring an argument, and you have to structure an argument in a way that gets people from point A to point Z. So that applies as well. And then comedians, we have this, you know, this does pertain to this in a way, but I'm just kind of spitballing here. I mean, comedians, we have this thing where it's like, we can talk about politics, and if somebody like disagrees with us, we're like, hey, what do I know? I'm a comedian, you know,
right.
I'm just being funny, you know, but at the same time, we can, you know, a comedian can talk about politics and get people to laugh about an issue that they may disagree with because it's comedy, you know? So in a sense, and like, just like you see in this clip, you know, to get people to laugh or to appreciate a joke structure on a narrative that they inherently disagree with is a form of progress. So I'm not saying that like people who come to the negotiation table should be telling each other jokes, but humor is an example of a shared communication. And there's certainly analogous ways of achieving that where no laughter is involved. But, you know, why not have some laughs as well?
Yeah.
That's I think we should just end it right there. I mean, that was I mean, you do have to start from that. Like, you do have to make that connection. You do have to, whether it's making a connection through previous conversation, kind of humanizing yourself in the situation too, finding that common ground. Like, what's one thing that we all share?
Absolutely. And then there's broad reach too. So comedians, you know, if we want to be good, we'll go to Alabama, we'll go to Nevada, we'll go to Utah, we'll go to Russia if they book us. Like, we'll go wherever we can so that we can experience different kinds of audiences. And that broadness leads you to be able to speak to the whole human consciousness versus just preaching the choir of people who think exactly like you, which is essentially what politicians are trained to do. I mean, a lot of politicians are diplomatic and have broad reach. Obviously, you have to have the broad reach to get elected to a big office. But a lot of politicians just play to their base. They play to that small niche of people who are, you know, especially if you're like a mayor. You know, but like the broadness is something that politicians can take note of. Like, when you can really speak to a crowd anywhere, and because comedy is able to transcend international languages and barriers, that gives us the ability to speak to the whole human consciousness.
Man, politicians would be terrible comics.
They are terrible comics.
Imagine AOC going up in a room in Oklahoma, or Ted Cruz going up in a room in Brooklyn.
He's already nailed that coffin.
They would do a lot of crowd work, I think.
Yeah. They are good at crowd work.
And that's a really good point too. Is my parents have one way of thinking, and I'm very like, you know, it's having that comedic mind. Is like, if I'm in front of an audience that isn't like me, I want to connect with them, but I still want to get them to laugh at my same points. So like, how can I bridge that gap? Because that's really what comedy is. It's bridging the gap between where you are and where you want to be with all that empty space in the middle. And there's an infinite number of ways to do that. So it's, how can I do it in a way where, you know, in between A through Z, this audience wants N, I'm gonna give them N, but I'm gonna do it in a way that's real to me and not pandering.
Absolutely. And that's like the optimism here. It's like, listen, if I can make a crowd laugh at a dead baby joke, we can make a peace deal.
Right.
It's a bumper sticker right there, man. What about you, Steve? I mean, you know, you have some pretty controversial material in front of certain audiences, but I've seen it kill in front of those audiences. I've seen you do well at like Funny Stop in front of like a more right audience with your like cop joke.
Be funny first. Don't try to just be pushing buttons, because obviously that doesn't work. if you've done comedy for any amount of time, but be fair and reasonable. I was going to bring that up with how you were like broadening and you got to be fair, reasonable, be in, like you said, structuring an argument, like have that argument in good faith. And then there's no way people can deny you no matter what your point of view, if that comes through. Right. It's like, well, he did make a good point. So it's like, it's right there.
The comedian has to be in touch with the audience, because if you're not, people are gonna feel it. People are gonna feel that you're not good at constructing arguments, that you are going against the grain in a way that's not gonna work. So you do have to know your audience well enough to be like, I know that they're not gonna like this topic, but I'm gonna find a way to get them to laugh at the end.
Right.
And you're never, you're never going to get 100% of the audience 100% of the time. So when you do have, so you made that the point of there were a few that were clear Zionists in that crowd that day. How do you continue to connect with the audience as a whole without like having their silence speak louder than the rest of the situation?
Well, like I did in the beginning, like, why are you not laughing? That's funny. That's the first line of defense. And then, at some point, if you try it, I always like to try different kinds of jokes if I have the time to see if I can get someone who wasn't laughing to laugh. And I mean, there's always this thing when sometimes people just want to be like addressed directly, whether it's like they want the eye contact, like you give them the eye contact to deliver a joke and then they'll smile because you know that you're trying, and that warms them up a little bit. They'll start being a little more receptive. It doesn't work with everybody. Sometimes people like it makes them even weirder when you give them the eye contact. Sometimes you ask them directly, like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And then I remember I had a woman in the front row one time, and she was like just angry the whole time, and then I was just like, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm great." And like she just realized that she just was making that face for whatever reason, and it was just a face. And then sometimes people just don't like you. They don't like you, or they don't like your stand up, but they don't want to laugh. And at that point, it's like you can either like really dig and like try to get an altercation out of it, or you can just be like, hey, let's just agree to disagree. I'm leaving now. Are you going to clap because I'm leaving at least?
Yeah. You can't win them all over. That's fine. That's perfectly fine.
I have the resting angry face and the like, don't look at me while like other comedians will make eye contact with me back. I'm not concentrating on what you're saying anymore. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I get it. So as far as, if people are struggling with this situation, if you could give them a bit of advice to open up to the humor that's inherent in any given situation, everybody's different, but, from your perspective, which is the beauty of comedy, is that we each have our own way of finding humor in situations. So what's one way that you've been able to find humor in something as touchy as this?
Yeah, I mean, just first of all, know that it's possible. Anything can be funny if you put the will to it, you'll get there. So like, don't doubt. Any kind of sense like, oh, you can't make this topic funny. You're wrong. Anything can be funny. There's timing. I mean, timing is very important. But you could, there's a tragedy today. You can make a joke tomorrow to the right crowd and the right words. And when it seems very difficult because the topic is so divisive or touchy, you go around it. You basically give the topic a hug by not getting into the crux of it and doing the thing that divides the people, but like going around it, like finding what can we all agree on. And this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about of like how you make progress in a debate or in a negotiation, but like certainly there are some things that we can agree on. And that's a very safe but also effective way of finding the initial funny zone. But like start where we all agree and pepper it with silly stuff, and that's where you can start. And then as you get better and you get more comfortable, you can go deeper into the issue and actually get to the crux of the issue without making the whole thing explode.
Yeah.
That human behavioral flaw of violence for peace.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
irony, and it's just built into every given situation, especially when it comes to something so binary. It's like the us versus them. It's like, bro, really? This is what we're still dealing with this.
Totally.
Like, there's a neighborhood in Brooklyn. There's a building in Brooklyn that has people from 100 different races and religions and beliefs and backgrounds in it right now. Be like that building in Brooklyn. I'm sure it exists.
Yeah,
it's hypothetical, but I'm sure it exists.
Hypothetical building.
Yeah. And the other thing is, wrap things around your personal experience. Nobody can deny your personal experience. If you wrap things around yourself personally, and it also gets them interested, like, why is this person so personally invested? Obviously, with this specific case, I have a way in because of my heritage. But you may have another way into a topic that may not involve your heritage or something that directly affected you. You may just have a friend who was affected by something, but find a way to wrap your personal experience around it. And people can't deny your personal experience. So instead of like declaring things as fact or your opinions that nobody gives a shit about, start with your personal experience, and people will at least have the way they'll center themselves with you on the bit.
Yeah.
That's a good note.
Good luck finding the pull quote on this one.
Yeah,
buddy.
I know. This whole episode is pull quotes. Literally, we're gonna have like 50 different promos. We're gonna release it next week just because it is a pretty current topic. Typically, we keep them like locked away in the chamber, but in this case, this is going to be a pretty quick release. So, is there anything that you want to plug? Any social media that we should follow you on? Where do we find all that?
At Sammy Obeid is all the stuff. Just my name. I'm still doing virtual shows on my own network. You can get free tickets to them at kocomedy.com. And then I'm starting to get out and touring, but I'm not like advertising my tour schedule yet because I'm not doing like any big headlining shows. I'm just kind of like getting out there and doing shows slowly. So for now, just the socials. And that's it.
Cool. Well, we
Hey,
appreciate
I'm Lebanese. Can I get a spot on that?
That's still a no, sir.
You can't laugh at that.
Well, this has been a pleasure and a really insightful conversation. And we really appreciate you joining us to help us prove that no matter how divisive, no matter how polarizing, no matter how touchy a conflict can get or a topic can get, whether it's 80 years old or centuries old, you can laugh at that.
Absolutely.
You can't laugh at that.